The 50mm lens, or Nifty 50, is my absolute favorite lens that I use to shoot just about everything. In this video, I'm going to give you 6 reasons why I think the 50mm lens belongs in every photographer's camera bag. First, a little background. I'm a self-taught photographer. I've been shooting for over 10 years, shooting mainly corporate events, editorial photography, and concert photography. I've owned multiple camera brands over the years, including Nikon, Canon, Sony, and Fujifilm, and every single time I've switched brands, I've purchased a 50mm lens. And here's why. First of all, this lens is super light and compact. Just about every camera brand makes a 50mm lens, and it's usually a 50mm f1.8, or maybe even a faster lens like a f1.4 or 1.2. But you can get away with a 1.8 lens, and I really think it's the best for the size. And because of its size, this is a really great lens for street and travel photography, and even event photography when you need to be taking candid shots. When this lens is on your camera, it blends in so well, people barely look at you twice, and it also saves your shoulders and back from a lot of pain. So if you're looking for a super lightweight and compact lens, then you really can't go wrong with a 50mm lens. The second reason why the 50mm lens is so great is that it's really close to what your eye sees, and that's a single eye. So if you close one eye and take a look, what you see is basically equivalent to a 50mm lens when you're shooting on a full frame camera. For this reason, 50mm is a really natural focal length, and so it's really easy to compose because we look at things all the time with our eyes. So using 50mm helps you find shots and compose really easily. For that reason, many professional photographers advise beginning photographers to start out with the 50mm lens. I actually don't agree with that. There's another lens that I recommend for beginners instead, and I'm going to talk about that lens next week, so subscribe if you'd like to see that video, and let me know in the comments if you have any guesses about what that lens might be. The next reason why the 50mm lens is so great is that it has a really fast maximum aperture, so it lets a lot of light into your camera's sensor. The most standard 50mm aperture is f1.8, but it can get as fast as f1.4 or even f1.2. But the faster the aperture, the bigger and heavier and more expensive that lens gets. So for most of us, we can do just fine with f1.8. If you have a fast aperture lens, that allows you to shoot in more lower lighting conditions without flash, and also shoot at lower ISOs so that your images have less noise or less grain. I especially have found this lens to be helpful when shooting concerts because if you're not familiar, concerts only let you shoot the first 3 songs with no flash. So I had to learn really quickly how to shoot without flash and a lot of ambient lighting. So having a fast aperture lens like this 50mm f1.8 was really great for those situations. The next reason why this lens is so great is that 50mm is a really great focal length. It's not a wide lens. Generally speaking, anything wider than 24mm is considered wide, so 50mm is more of a mid-range focal length. So in most cases, you'll have to be a little bit more thoughtful about your composition because of that tight 50mm focal length. You may even have to physically move around a lot more with this lens because it doesn't have a zoom in it. But the nice thing about shooting tight like this is that you can get a really nice compressed background with great bokeh, or that blurred out background, without having to get too close to your subject. In that sense, 50mm is a great focal length for shooting portraits. It lets you get semi-environmental portraits without getting too close to your subject, but also getting that pleasing blurred out background. It's also really great for shooting details. So if you shoot weddings or events and you have to get close-up shots or detail shots and you want to isolate your subject, then 50mm is so great for shooting that. Next, this lens is super affordable. 50mm lenses are generally pretty inexpensive as long as you get the f1.8 version. Even Canon just released a brand new RF 50mm f1.8, and the price point is like the lowest I think that Canon RF lenses have ever been. It's $200, which is pretty reasonable. Also, because every camera brand makes a 50mm lens, these lenses have been around for a long time, so it's pretty easy to get a used or refurbished lens at a much lower cost. So if you want to test out this lens and you're not really sure about committing to it, then don't worry about the price point. Go ahead and try it out because it really doesn't break the bank to get this lens. And the final reason to get this lens is that it is tack sharp. Because this is a prime lens and not a zoom lens, it has fewer moving internal parts, so it is a lot sharper. It also tends to have better color rendition and less chromatic aberration. The only trade-off with this lens is that you can't zoom. If you want to zoom, you have to physically move your body But that's not really such a bad thing, because I do find that the more I move around, whether it's getting closer to my subject, further away from my subject, the more my creative juices start flowing, and I actually find different compositions that I wouldn't normally find. So that's one of the reasons why having a prime lens such as this 50mm is so great for creativity. So in conclusion, whether you're a beginning photographer or professional photographer, you should absolutely have a 50mm lens in your camera bag. For beginning photographers, this is a lens that I absolutely recommend adding to your arsenal, because even professionals use this lens, so you can't go wrong with it. It can take some time to appreciate because it is a prime lens and you don't have the luxury of zooming, but it's a lens that the more you shoot and get comfortable with your camera, the more you're going to appreciate and love this lens. So now I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. What do you think about the 50mm lens? Do you agree or disagree with any of my points? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Please tune in next week and I'll talk about my next favorite lens that I recommend that all beginners have.